Trying to get the lighting right in a hotel room is miserable. Look at this. Looks like I'm filming next to heaven. What is up, film fans? Welcome back to my channel. I waited until the sun went away, but today we are talking about the Tragedy of Macbeth, the first movie that I was able to see at the New York Film Festival. I was also able to attend a Q&A, which I've put some things on social media, but I'll also play some clips at the end of this video. But right now, I want to tell you guys why I believe this movie has some really solid opportunities to be talked about for Oscars towards the end of the year. We're going to discuss it spoiler-free, of course, directed by Joel Cohen, starring the likes of Denzel Washington, Brendan Gleeson, Corey Hawkins, and Frances McDormand. Something wicked this way comes. Macbeth receives a prophecy from a trio of witches that one day he will become King of Scotland. Consumed by ambition and spurred to action by his wife, Macbeth murders his king and takes the throne for himself. Now, you may know exactly what this movie, or the likes of what this film is going to bring us if you are a fan of this Shakespearean tale, if you enjoy this type of movie in what Macbeth is going to bring us. A tragedy that we have seen plenty movies, television shows, projects attempt to achieve the likes of before, but not many have lived up to this specific story. And you go into this movie expecting greatness, not only because the Coen brothers, at least one of two, Joel Cohen this time around, one of my favorite movies of all time, No Country for Old Men, one of the reasons why I started doing what I do, and then the cast, Denzel, Frances McDormand, everyone involved is not only getting you hyped up for the film, but they're delivering as you watch this movie. And what I can say about this movie is not every intention of what the screenplay is trying to do is achieved. The idea is to adapt this Shakespearean material in a way that we've never really seen it presented to us before, featuring just top-notch spectacular cinematography, which we'll talk about here in just a second, but also translate it in a way that makes it appeal to a more broad audience. Now, does it do that? I don't look at the Tragedy of Macbeth and see it as a film that general audiences are going to go into who don't really know of Shakespeare. First of all, I feel like you kind of have to know a little bit if you're going into this movie or you have a will to go into this film. But if you're going in knowing nothing about Shakespeare, you're going to hear the dialect and the way that certain words are used, bringing sentences together, because while it's trying to appeal to a more broad audience, using maybe a bit more action, a few more sequences here and there, and of course, one of the best casts of the year so far, you also have that barrier of language and the way certain things are presented to where even I, at times, right, I understood exactly what was happening, but there were also moments and certain scenes that delivered something that I wasn't fully there on. And I feel like a lot of that is due to the Shakespearean language presented to us, because they do go full on in that language. They're not revitalizing it for 2021 and adding our own dialect to it and, you know, playing videos and making TikToks. No, this is this is as classic of a Macbeth tale as you can imagine. But the thing that makes this movie stand out and that makes it work so well is the fact that it's presented to us with some of the best looking shots, shot selection, cinematography, all of that I have ever seen. And that's not me trying to overhype this hyperbole, all of that. Of course, I get excited when I see a film via A24, via this director or directors, and of course this cast. But when you give me a moment in every single scene, and it feels like every frame, I mean, I'll have to go back and watch it, every frame, you can stop the movie, it could be painted, and I could put that poster on my wall and be extremely happy with it. That's how beautiful it is, down to something that we rarely talk about in movies, the way that one scene transitions into another. And if you're a blockbuster fan, obviously Star Wars, they do the wipes, and different films have different styles. This movie, we go from scene to scene, and the way that one scene will just seamlessly flow into another with that Wes Anderson center frame style for the most part, and that black and white, the look, the feel, the aesthetic to it that you can liken something haunting. You look at a recent film like The Lighthouse, how it uses that color correction to just bring out this chill-inducing fear. Some of the shots, they're just so gritty and grimy, but they're presented to us in that way. And this movie gets that way at points, right? You just feel a little bit icky about what's going on screen because of Macbeth's descent into where he ends up at the end of the film. And that's presented to us in this beautiful black and white, and everything about the visuals here, I mean, it's just top notch. If you look at where this is going during Oscar season and what it will be nominated for, we'll talk about Best Picture here in just a second, but technical nominations across the board, and at this point, I expect wins. I expect maybe production design, maybe cinematography, and the likes of all of that. It's just incredible. Back to the story, there are certain key moments that I feel like I need to see again, not because they were completely unattainable, but because there's just so much going on and you really have to focus and lock in on the dialogue again. And I do want to preface with the fact that this is not coming from someone who is obsessed with Shakespeare, right? So I'm approaching this, I guess, more like a general audience member when it comes to that, because I like Shakespeare, I appreciate Shakespeare, but I've never been overwhelmed by Macbeth, right? But what you get via the moments from certain actors in this movie, whether it be a line delivery or Denzel gives an incredible monologue at one point where he brings that training day energy. I mean, he is putting everything he has into this because his character, what he was presented with at the beginning of the film via these witches, and then where that leads him to, where the characters around him go because of the way that he's acting and the actions that he is taking. And all of that builds up to this point in the third act where he is giving a monologue and there's so much energy coming from his performance. And then you look at Frances McDormand, who's not actually in this film as much as I thought she would be, right? She's in there. There's an argument to be made that she could be supporting actress, right? That's how little screen time she gets, but the command that she has with that screen time, there is no doubt in my mind she's getting a nomination. I believe Denzel will, but Frances McDormand, one of the best performances I've ever seen from her, and you could tell that passion while watching the film. You could tell it afterwards at the Q&A when she does get emotional with Denzel, kind of talking about her love and how she performed one of these monologues when she was younger and how that's translated into her career. It feels like her career, and she says it in the Q&A, has been building up to this point, and that's absolutely the case here. She is incredible. Brendan Gleeson is King Duncan, gives a great performance. Harry Melling from Harry Potter fame plays Malcolm, who is hit with this really unexpected shock later on in the film, and the way that he handles that, I believe, was just so well done from his perspective. He was really good. Corey Hawkins plays Macduff. Moses Ingram plays Lady Macduff. Moses not in the film as much, but she does a wonderful job. Corey Hawkins, the energy that he brings to this role, so good. And even with little screen time in the first half, you are so with his character a bit later on when he confronts one of our characters, and that's when we start to get these action-packed scenes. And if you're looking for action in the tragedy of Macbeth, and that's solely what you want out of this film, that's not what you're going to get. And because of that, there were points where I wish we would have gotten maybe a bit more, but that's not what the movie is. The action scenes that were presented were great. The sound effects between the swords, the cinematography, all of that. But there's only one or two moments. Everything else is dialogue-heavy, story-heavy, this build-up, the descent into madness, and that's basically what the tragedy of Macbeth is. It would also be a tragedy of me, see what I did there? Not to mention Kathryn Hunter, who plays the witches, and maybe a couple of other characters. Listen, Kathryn Hunter, as this character, absolutely incredible. We look at where nominations are going to go. I don't know if she's going to get one, but oh my goodness, I was riveted by that performance, from the narration to everything beyond that, the physicality in the performance. Just had to give her a shout out. But beyond that, I believe the story here is impressive. I was locked in almost solely due to the style of it, but then the story started to become engaging, and the third act was absolutely riveting. It does take a bit to get there, I will fully admit. Even though the movie isn't the longest ever, the pacing is at times. But again, it all just comes down to what's being presented to us on screen. Some people may say style over substance, but this is Shakespeare. They are taking it, they are adapting it, and I will say, and I've seen not every adaptation, but a lot of them. This is one of the best Shakespearean adaptations I have ever seen. Ever. Trying to do what they did, they absolutely accomplished it, and this is a movie that's really impressive. In terms of Best Picture and where that's going to go, I see it right now in that 7 through 10 spot. Again, the movie is really, really good, really impressive, but it's not going to be for everyone, and because of that, it could slip out, but I do believe this one will end up getting one. So before I give you guys my score, I want to say thank you so much for joining me in this video in my hotel room. Promise, I'll be back home soon. The Tragedy of Macbeth is visually spectacular. The cinematography is riveting, and certain shots will have your jaw on the floor. The story itself is not as engaging as the visuals. Regardless, Cohen and his cast impress on every level. I'm going in 80% for The Tragedy of Macbeth. This is a movie, if you are a fan of this character, of Shakespeare, of the Cohen brothers, you are definitely going to want to see. Just expect a story that focuses and hones in on the dialogue, and if you expect that going in, I think you're going to be blown away by the visuals here. So let me know down below, are you excited for The Tragedy of Macbeth? It also feels very A24, and y'all know how I feel about A24. Love that studio. Thanks so much for joining me. Here are a couple of clips from the Q&A, some things that I filmed on my phone. Sorry, the video's ugly. It was on a phone.
The producer of the film, who also plays Lady Macbeth, McDormand. Lord Macbeth himself, Denzel Washington.
This is a fascinating journey for me. I went to school 1,000 feet from here and played Othello at 20. Didn't know what I was doing. So just a long 1,000 feet, you know, but when you're working with two, not just two, but I almost used the word old, but more states, whatever the word is,
Elders.
masters.
Elders.
And then witnessing these young masters chasing us down like.
Pulling toward the same vision, which is sometimes rare in films because everyone's sort of coming at it from a different angle, but to have those 3 weeks where we sort of set out the mission of what we want to achieve was just, I think, vital, and why it's such
Oh, I'm sorry, what was the question?
About being an older couple. Well, you know, part of what Joel and I talked about really early, because the first thing I ever did, the first thing that got me hooked on wanting to be an actor for the rest of my life was the sleepwalking scene from The Tragedy. And I did it when I was 14, and then so I've pretty much been practicing and rehearsing for it for 50 years. So I feel like it kind of had a fated inevitability to it, and that it ended up being sculpted in this way seems absolutely perfect. You know, at some point we have to talk about the ceremony that we had for our 4 elders that used this film as their punctuation point on their film careers. Remember when we had them kneel before us? And we took
Yes, that's right, that's correct.
We had 4 colleagues.
Oh, that's right, Carl and
Yeah, and they decided to make this film their last film, and so we had a ceremony. We made these really beautiful medals on a beautiful ribbon, and we had the sword out, and they knelt. We helped them get up, knelt. We made them knights and ladies. That was really, really big. But
on the phone.
yeah, Will's calling. Sorry, I'll call you later, Al.